The British and Irish Lions have the chance to create a bit of sporting history this weekend. They're hoping to seal a 3-match Lions series clean sweep for the first time since 1904.
Yeah, because they did go 3-0 up away at South Africa back in 1974, but they drew the final test. For more on this, we are joined by former Wallabies captain and Stan Sports commentator Michael Hooper. Michael, great to speak to you this morning. Thanks for coming on. Let's start by reflecting on that Lions victory over Australia on Saturday at the MCG. How tough was that to take? Because Australia played very well.
They did play very well. They showed up in a very different way from the first test. And thank you for having me on this morning. They showed up in a very different way from the first test. And they gave it to the Lions, truthfully, for a large portion of that game. Obviously came down right to the end, which is we've seen so much news about in the last week. I'm sure the same's been over there. It just shows you how great it is to have the British and Irish Lions down here in our country. It was a hell of a game. 90,000 people at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. It was exceptional.
You said after the final whistle that the clear out from Jack Morgan was at least a penalty and the final try should have been disallowed as a result. That was definitely the feeling, wasn't it, of the Wallabies on the pitch. Some people claim that perhaps it was a bit of play acting. We're just sort of seeing it all again now as well. So do you still stand by those comments? Do you still think that final try should have been chalked off?
Yes, I believe Jack Morgan was so effective in his clean out because it was an illegal clean out by going off his feet. I've said that on Stan Sport and Channel 9 and in many publications this week. So, no, I stand by it. And I think it's the funny thing and also, you know, a kind of beauty in our game that if you wore a red jersey, it's definitely not a penalty. If you're an Australian, it definitely was a penalty. So, no, it's long in the past now.
Yeah, well, it is, because now your attention has to turn, of course, to the final test. Take us into the Australia dressing room. You know you played well, as we've mentioned, but how hard is it to pick yourself up when you know that the series is now lost despite having one game to go?
I think, you know, if the shoes were on the other foot, it'd be the same. You know, if the Lions were heading into a dead series, you still get the opportunity to play for the jersey. In Australia's case, you get the chance to represent your country. You know, our country is going to see a lot of big moments in rugby over the course of the next few years. So it's a real chance for the Wallabies to, you know, they had a decent and a more than a decent performance last week, and they would want to be backing that up. So that's first and foremost. You know, they get to represent the country, and then they get a chance to be really consistent, which is something that's probably eluded the Wallabies for some time now.
How important is it as well, just in terms of, you know, the bigger picture of the sport as well, that the Wallabies do restore some pride for themselves, like you say, when they have had a difficult time by their standards of late?
Yeah, look, there's always pride in the Wallaby jersey. We've got a rich and healthy history. And, you know, I guess part of that and the difficulty of that is you try and live up to that expectation week in, week out. The reality is test match rugby and international rugby is such a competitive environment in this day and age. And we see that, and we saw that in the last World Cup. We didn't manage to make the quarterfinals. We got knocked out in the pool stages. Ireland, the best team in the world at that point, gets knocked out in the quarters. Still haven't made it through to a semi-final. So we know how hard it is to be at that pointy end of world rugby in each test match. So if you're a consistent international team, you're doing something right, and that's what these guys would be striving to be doing.
In terms of team selection, Australia were boosted by the return of Will Skelton, Rob Valetini as well in the last test. I assume they'll be starting again on Saturday?
I would hope so. I mean, they were outstanding in that game. I think Will Skelton's one of the best performances I've seen in a green and gold jersey from him. Robbie Valentini's been doing more of the same of what he's been doing the last couple of years. He's been the Wallabies' best player for some time now. You know, those guys did come off the field early. They were returning from calf injuries and, you know, awareness is what we call it these days, so a bit of tightness in the calf. So if they are good to go and there's a low risk of them re-injuring that, then they'll be playing. Then, yes, they will be playing. if there's a chance that it could jeopardise the rest of the season. We know the rest of the season is very important because World Cup rankings get put in place for the end of the year, which means your draw gets pulled for the 2027 World Cup. So the rest of the year is extremely important, and we've got some big trophies to play for down here too. So if they're fit, they'll be playing, but they'll want to make sure of it.
It's such a balancing act, isn't it, with this international calendar? Just how much have you enjoyed the series as a whole? Because the feeling over here is very much that the first test was perhaps a little bit flat, but last weekend brought it all back to life and was proper test rugby like we expect to see from a Lions tour.
You know what, we love sport down here. We love all sport. We've got such a competitive landscape, particularly in our winter season, of all the codes that we've got playing down here. And when something like this comes down, and yes, it's only once every 12 years, everyone is talking about the game. Everyone gets behind, the Wallabies, and the fans, the British and Irish fans are just amazing. Good crack. Enjoy the footy, rain, hail or shine, and it's raining a bit here in Sydney this week for the final test. So, but we know that they'll be turning up in droves. For the economics of the game, it's great here, and just for the fun, you realise, it's great to be a Wallaby supporter and a rugby union supporter as well. So everyone's gotten behind it back down here. We've loved it, and can't wait for this third game.
Yeah, Lions tours are always a great spectacle for rugby union fans. And how important is it for rugby union in Australia? Well, if let's say you don't win this final test and it is 3-0, how hard will the fans and the media come down on this Australia side?
I think a lot will be hinged on the actual performance itself. We are pretty brutal down here, no matter what code you play on outcome. But I think people will be pleased if the game is similar to last week, where, the Wallabies were unplayable for 40 minutes of that test. And they'll want, I think, as a fan and as a country, you want to see elements of that in next week. Now, sometimes you can play amazing and you just get beaten by a team that played better. But if you keep that level to around amazing, you're going to come out with a much better ratio than before. So I think that's what people want to be seeing in terms of, I mentioned how competitive the landscape is. You could lose this, but you win a Bledisloe. Bledisloe is something that we haven't held in since 2002. So you win that. You don't want to write off things after a couple of games. So there's plenty to play for. There's lots more than just the British and Irish Lions. It's a great thing. But, the series is gone. It's prepping for, what's left in this year, and in particular, the big show in 2 years' time.
Yeah, Michael, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.